Hello and welcome to our Creative Conversations podcast where we discuss art in, creativity really in art and in business to really inspire your own creative thinking potential. So this is a partnership between career and cultural wellness company, the Brimful Life, and No Studios, Milwaukee's social club for artists and creatives. So we are here today live at the Fall X Festival in the Wisconsin Center, and I'm really excited about this conversation. So we have back with us again, thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me again.
John Zertasky.
Exciting.
So he is author of Shift and Make Time. So two books all about how to make individuals and teams more effective.
Yeah.
And then we have Wanyah Frazier, who's a choreographer and owner of the new Wolf Dance Studio. And you really bring dancers together to make them effective as a cohesive team, right? So that's really the topic that we're going to be talking about, like your creative approaches to bringing out the best in people and the best in teams in business and in art, right? So, John, let's start with you.
Sure.
So, team building, what does that mean for you? And when you're working with companies and working with businesses, what's the outcome that you're trying to achieve when you think about bringing out the best in teams?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned team building, and I deliberately steer away from team building. I think the best way to build a team and bring people together is to give them some shared purpose or cause, some work that they can do together. And that's way more meaningful than like having, some like cheesy, trust building exercise or taking the team out of the office and going to have a bowling offsite.
Yeah. Oh God, well, no more bowling. Please, no more bowling.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that.
So it's really about trying to align people around, something that they care about. And then one of the things that I try to do is I try to look at what are the sort of like autopilot kind of default things that people do, and there's so many of them. So when you get a team together, they kind of default to these normal things. Like everybody says like, oh, let's brainstorm, let's jump in a conference room and figure it out. But if you don't have a good process for working together, you're just going to waste your time, you're going to spin your wheels, people aren't going to feel like they're being heard, like they have a chance to really contribute. So I try to put into place new processes that allow each individual to contribute what they bring to the table, and then also kind of have fair and structured ways of making decisions so that it doesn't just go to like whoever the person with the loudest voice is or the person who has the reputation for being creative or whatever.
Okay, so I love it. So you've got like tried and true processes, and it really starts with making sure everybody's on the same page with purpose and the why.
Yep.
How often do you step into a team and everybody thinks that they're on the same page with purpose and they're really not? Like they each have a different definition of why they're there.
It happens a ton, And so one of the things that I do when I first start working with a team, especially if we're going to do design sprint process together, which is what my first book is about, we will spend the first entire day. It's a 5-day process, and we'll spend one full day just getting everybody on the same page. And we do this mapping exercise where we basically, the three of us, let's say we were going to talk about something like, you mentioned starting a nonprofit, and let's say we were going to talk about starting a nonprofit to help with some particular issue, and we just jumped into what should we do? As a nonprofit. We would each have a different map in our brain of the world, of what it looks like, our different assumptions. And so what I try to do when I'm first working with a team is draw those assumptions out, get that map out of people's brains and create a shared map so that we're all kind of operating off the same, literally if you think of a map, you lay it out on the table and say like, all right, where are we and where are we trying to go? That's the starting point, is to get everybody aligned. And then it makes the rest of your time together just so much more valuable.
So invest in that time up front. Makes perfect sense.
You have to go slow so that you can go fast.
Right. All right. So two important words, purpose and process. So Wanyah, in your world, in the art world, in dance, talk to me, what does purpose and process mean to you when you're working with dancers?
Okay, that's actually a lot of what John said applies directly to dance. So you mentioned individuals. Establishing, especially in dance, each dancer has a different background. They come with different techniques, different skills. And so when I'm choreographing a piece, when I'm bringing people together, the first thing that I do normally is if I'm building a team for a specific project, I meet with each dancer beforehand. I do a little bit of research in terms of what they do, how they move, what they kind of associate with. And I like to have a sit down and figure out what their purpose is with joining the choreography. Are they doing it simply to be in a show? They haven't performed in a long time. Are they looking to catapult themselves into a platform for it? Like, what is their goal? And then when I get them into the room, it's kind of finding the perfect spot for each individual's personality. And I think it can be time consuming, but if you can find what strengths each person has and play to those strengths, rather than focus on what techniques or what training they didn't have beforehand, we can start to build a cohesive group. And the focus comes on, if you can't do 8 turns, that's fine, they can, but you excel in floor work. And so we can incorporate both into a piece. Or finding each person where they excel and incorporating that into the overall vision. He was also talking about a purpose, establishing a purpose for the group. So when we're working on a show, we all know what the end goal of the show is.
Right.
When the show is, what we're trying to accomplish, and what the overall vision is. I think that sometimes can be daunting for choreographers or for artists to think of the end goal, because we simply do. Sometimes we'll jump in and we're like, I have an idea, it has to get out, where's it going? And so we do it, and then we're like, I don't know what this is for. So when working with other artists, you have to give them a goal right off the bat. Because if you don't, you have 8 different artsy personalities who all want to do something and have an idea of like, you know what, that would be cool right there, so I'm just gonna, and then you can have your vision shooting in 8 different directions. So establishing like, this is what I want you to end, and so our vision might be a piece that is focusing on trauma.
Yeah.
So each dancer can interpret trauma in their own way, and then we find out how to pair each person and put them in a proper place where their trauma or their idea, their concept of trauma and movement plays into the overall vision.
Yeah. All right, so let me just say some like real talk here, right? So listening to you both talk, like I'd love to work for you and I'd love to dance for you, because you seem to have this very idealistic way of like, you'll work with people where they're at and find that unique place for them to make a whole. Realistically though, can you really work with everybody? Do you ever have situations where like, this person just is not going to fit? Do you ever have that situation? And if so, how do you address that so you can still move forward? I guess it just can still achieve an outcome, right?
Yeah. I mean, it can happen. And I think that, and I'd be really interested to hear how you approach this, but like in my work, helping people come together and work toward building a product or a service or some new marketing or building their business, I always try to be very deliberate beforehand about the construction of the team and really looking at, okay, what skills do you bring to the table, what background do you have, and not just saying, come on everybody, let's jump in a room and we'll figure it out, but really constructing that team as part of the design process, right? First design the team, and then design the process so that we can all work together to design whatever it is we're trying to bring into the world.
So selection is really important in terms of the values or the skill sets or the competencies that would need to complete the team.
Totally.
And I'm assuming for choreography, that's the equivalent of a tryout, right?
But in especially in my experience, I've had situations where I have the ability to audition and choose specific people and like you said, screen, what are you going to bring to the table? What is your personality? The most amazing thing is, in an audition, you can tell so much about a person. You can figure out their work ethic. You can figure out their personality in terms of how they approach challenges. Or do they get frustrated easily? Do they think extremely highly of themselves? And that doesn't necessarily match up to what they are presenting in that audition. You can see a lot of that. And so that gives you the opportunity to say, you know what, well, they can do this really well, but I don't know if this personality will mesh with the team that I'm building. In other situations, you get what you get. So you may have a group where you need to have 20 people, 15 would have made it, and you still need 5 other people to be on the team because you have to fill that quota. So what you end up having to do is, it does become a lot of work on the choreographer in the sense where I have to make sure everyone's still on the same page, and I can't necessarily afford to spend more time on those extra 5 people when I'm moving forward because I only have 2 months and I have an 8-minute piece. So that means I need to keep moving. But what that also may mean is more time and investment on my end in terms of maybe some work on the outside and addressing people in one-on-one situations where bringing them up to speed, addressing concerns they may have. There's a lot of preparation outside of the actual project that I feel like has to take place, and a lot of investment that can happen in those cases, but it's really just a commitment to getting the job done and what needs to be done to accomplish that.
I also think it's worth talking about what happens to those people who don't make the cut, right? Those people who are, to use a dirty word, rejected, right? And I often tell people that a rejection says more about the person who rejected you than it does about you, right? And most people are good and most people have some unique skills, and most people want to do things that matter. They have
Right.
good intentions. So if somebody doesn't fit into a team, it's not because they are fundamentally a bad person or
Right.
an unskilled
Right.
or an unvaluable person.
Right.
It's just that they didn't quite fit into the team that is going to be most ideal for the
Yeah.
purpose of what you're trying to do.
And in those cases, I have the luxury of always creating extra projects.
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay.
So
Right.
for the last 3 years, I've choreographed for the Milwaukee Pride Fest. And in that situation, you have dancers of all backgrounds. Anyone is allowed to join the team. It's supposed to be open. It's supposed to be body friendly. So there are a lot of, in terms of challenges, in terms of making sure that everyone feels supported, everyone has a place. But you do have situations where a person is not a dancer.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is not what they're supposed
Sure.
to do. And so where do we place those? So we may create situations where if they can't necessarily be in a group piece, that they have free dance sections where it's really just you go out and you enjoy yourself. Or we create small tasks and small things that they can still do to feel incorporated, where they may not have the same level of responsibility as the initial team that I have,
Yeah.
but ways to keep them engaged.
I used to work with somebody who actually had a dance background. Her name is
Very cool.
Kristen Briantes, and she is an amazing design producer for technology companies. And she had this technique for saying no that she called the Sour Patch Kid. You know, the candy, the Sour Patch
Yeah.
Kid? When you first taste it, it's super sour, but then it gets sweet at the end.
Yeah.
And so her strategy for rejecting people or saying no to people was, at first, you have to be a little bit sour. You're like, I'm sorry, it's not going to work out. But then try to be sweet. But I've got this other thing for you.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
maybe you go talk to this person, and that
Yeah.
might be a better fit. So
Yeah.
I love
Just
that
a way
strategy.
to adjust it.
Yeah.
Just a way to make sure that we are. The energy is still there. Yes, I did say no,
Mm-hmm.
but I can direct that somewhere else. I can send you somewhere else so you're not just feeling like a loss.
You know, I think that's really important because I think like a lot of leaders or people who are leading teams, whether in business or in art, I feel like people just stop with the no.
Yeah.
And they don't put that extra effort in terms of, because, you know, you're really impacting someone. You don't know how they're going to receive it. In some regards, I guess it's not your problem how they receive it. But I suppose going that extra mile really makes you stand out as a leader to like help somebody get from that sour initial taste to something else, right? I mean, that little bit I think can go a long way to help people flourish in other ways in their
Yeah.
career, right? I have a two-part question for both of you guys,
Okay.
right? So part one is from your vantage point of being people who are accountable for bringing the success of a team together. Other than technical skills, what is a really important competency for individuals to bring into the team if they want to be successful, a successful member of the team, right? Because you're all both dealing with people with very different skill sets, very different levels of competency around those skills. But apart from either like a technical skill, subject matter expert, or a level of dance ability, what else from the viewpoint that you guys have when you're pulling a team together, could we as members of the team really bring forward to help to contribute to that team?
Honesty.
Honesty?
Honesty.
Say more
I
about
find that to be the biggest challenge, but also the most rewarding challenge. As long as you are honest, especially in a dance sense. Let's say you are injured. Dancers have a tendency to hide injuries
Yeah.
because we feel like,
You could be
you
cut.
know what, I can be cut from the show.
Yeah.
Or, you know what, no, I'm okay, I can dance it off. No, stop. This hurts.
Yeah.
Go sit down. Honesty in the immediate sense protects us in the long run.
Okay.
Because then I know, okay, you know what? If I have you sit down now in 2 weeks, that means you can still perform in a month.
Yeah.
If you focus through this or force your way through this, it means that in a month you aren't usable. I've built an entire piece around you, and now you are injured, you're out, and we're all just screwed. But honesty in a sense that express your weaknesses. And I think especially in some of my working relationships, we talk about, no, you know what, that is very difficult for me. That
Yeah.
will not happen. I'm not going
Right.
to lie and say I'm going to do it. And acknowledging that, but then also finding ways to use your strengths to balance that out.
Yeah.
And focusing more on what you can do, where you excel, and then finding other people who are different than you and who really, and when I build a team, I find people who are different and have different skill sets because they'll all balance out in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say as a dancer, you lack clear communication, which is rough. But you have a friend who communicates really well and can do that for both of you. But you also, the other friend isn't going to go and work out. But you can encourage each other to work out and do some conditioning on the outside. Just finding ways to compensate within the team.
So honestly, I want to come back to that, but go ahead, John. What are your thoughts?
I think the most important thing that I look for is people's attitudes around failure and learning.
Okay.
Because, I think there's so much of a stigma around failure, and there's so much fear of failure, but really failure is our opportunity to learn, you know, and you know, to sort of to try things out and to learn in like a very like an experiential way, not just a theoretical way of somebody telling you something and saying, yeah, I get it, but like actually trying it and then you know, being willing, having the mindset that if it doesn't work out the way that you thought it was going to, we might call that a failure, but really it's not a failure.
It's an opportunity.
As long as you learn something from it.
Right.
If you just take that as a hit and you shut down and you're like, I guess
it's not a failure, it's just a different outcome than expected.
Exactly, yeah. So I really look for that attitude. And the way that I do that is by sort of asking people about previous work and previous projects and sort of ask them to tell me a story about like a project that didn't go the way they thought, and just kind of see how they talk about it.
So that was going to be the follow-up question, like how do you cultivate that that environment where people feel confident or have the courage to fail? So you sort of screen for it and you ask about past experience and people's relationships with failure or learning.
Yep.
But for honesty, hard to ask that in an interview because you don't know if they're lying. So do you have any techniques for cultivating a culture where people feel comfortable actually coming forward and being honest?
If you ask somebody if they were honest and they said no, I would be pretty honest. Right?
I mean, it's coming forward, but I think how I normally build that in any type of class environment is when I'm teaching or when I'm choreographing, it's ask questions. And what I mean by that is, if something does not make sense, I think a lot of times in an authoritative position, people feel like they can't ask you questions, they can't challenge you. And I think allowing people to challenge you occasionally, not roughly, but just ask questions if something doesn't make sense, if something isn't meshing the way it is, stopping me in the moment and acknowledging, like, you know what, that didn't make sense to me. Or, can you explain this again? Or always saying that mine is awesome, but I normally do this. I'm like, are there any questions? No. Are there any questions? Something's not right here. Please, somebody tell me what doesn't feel right. And just allowing yourself to be open enough to acknowledge, you know what? I didn't explain that better. Let me give you another. But just, I think, starting from the top and allowing myself, you know what? I did that wrong. We're going to go back. We're going to fix it. And acknowledging my own mistakes in front of the group.
Right.
Yeah.
And then making steps, preparing myself to fix those mistakes and showing them that I can do both.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times we, especially in a position of power and a position where I am running something, you feel as if you have to be perfect all the time, and that's not realistic.
Well, in doing that, you're also demonstrating honesty. You know, you're modeling that for everybody that you're working with.
Yeah, and I think it helps.
Yeah.
Because if they see that I will do it, they feel more comfortable doing it. And if maybe also allowing myself before and after some of my sessions to just give a little bit of time. If you need to reach out to me, if you can't do it in front of other people because of your personality, like that's just too much, allowing time for you to come and ask me questions or having sessions and making myself available to help you through those, and I think that kind of helps.
Yeah.
So as individuals who have accountability for bringing out the best in teams, right, you mentioned a couple of things. It seems like you have to exercise patience, do a lot of investment in the upfront, a curiosity to really get to know people, their different personalities, their different strengths, how to incorporate those into the team, modeling the behaviors that you want to see coming from the team. That's a lot. For you guys each personally, What is hard for you when you step into that role of bringing a team together? What are competencies that you need to do that well that you personally have to work on?
I don't know if it's so much of a competency, but for me the biggest thing is energy. Like if I'm not well myself, if I haven't taken the time to sleep enough, to eat properly, to move my body as a way of staying healthy and staying energized, like I'm not going to be able to do the things that I need to do, because at least for me, and this might be different for you, and I'm quite introverted, and so for me to be in a kind of a public situation where the whole room is looking to me, I need to bring a lot of energy to that. And so for me, it really actually is kind of everything I need to do outside of that room to prepare myself for that moment. Yeah.
Oh my God, I am sure it's just the same. I mean, you talked about energy, a healthy mind, healthy body, healthy eating. That has got to be the same.
That is literally it. It is maintaining yourself, because in a position of leadership, for all intents and purposes, you are investing in others. So you are expelling a lot of energy.
Yep.
You are always giving, and you're not always getting back.
Yeah.
So it is
Yeah.
a matter of, in your personal life, making sure that you do things to value yourself and to make sure that you are okay. Because I've had situations, one of the years, I dislocated my knee. And I was so intent on, I'm going to finish this project, so I pushed through it. And then so instead of letting myself heal for maybe the 2 or 3 weeks I needed, I pushed through and the injury lasted 6 months. So it's like finding those moments of you matter. And if I'm not okay, if I'm not where I need to be, I can't invest in others.
Well, the good thing is John has a book all about this.
Yeah. At least part of it, yeah. My book, Make Time, is the sort of principles of it are like to be very clear about what you want time for, to remove all the other distractions that suck up your time, and then to take care of yourself, to recognize that, in my world, it's a lot about sort of people need to be convinced that the brain and the body are connected. In your world, I imagine, it's all about the body, but in my world, people think that you can just sit in a swiveling desk chair for 14 hours a day and do your best work, and that's not true at all. So it's definitely important to find really concrete, really specific ways that people can build stuff into their day. Taking walks, making their own food, spending time face to face with others. That's really going to help them build that energy.
Yeah. It's an interesting point that you make. In business, we don't always see the connection between our brain and our body. We put so much premium on the brain part, and it's like our bodies are sitting there.
I would say we never think about it. I think it's the rare person who really thinks about that and internalizes it. Yeah.
So that leads me to our final question, and kind of a fun question. So since we have you both here, we're talking about team building, bringing out the best in people from a business perspective, from an art and a dance perspective. So John, is there anything that you're kind of curious about, or techniques for building teams from the dance world that you could see applying in your world? And then Wanyah, sort of the opposite question for John. Any question that you have for each other, or based on the conversation that you've heard today, you're like, hey, I'm gonna file that away. That might be something to bring to my work from the other side.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I do actually appreciate John's perspective in terms of designating tasks beforehand, going through the whole process, screening. I think that can be more applied in my field because there is a lot of reaction in the dance world, in the sense that we have a gig, I need to find people. And instead of building a team beforehand or having people on file that you know what, you already have this skill. And so that is something that you can start to build into.
Yeah.
Especially as you're building out your studio, right? That's a really great
finding
idea.
People beforehand instead of always just finding what is a
I love that. Yeah.
So, for me, one of the things that is so intriguing about dance and about really sports as well, and I know that dancers are athletes, but I love the orientation toward action. In the business world, there's this strong tendency to try to plan and analyze and research everything forever before you make this perfect plan and then go and execute on
paralysis.
it. Yeah, but I've seen if we can get people moving, and not physically moving, but if we can get them starting to do the work of whatever their business is before they have that perfectly made plan, it just kind of, I don't know, it has so many benefits. It gets people bought in, it gets people emotionally involved, it gets people over the fear of failure.
So almost sort of like a metaphorical type of warm-up that you might do before you get into the work.
Yeah. I think the fun thing is everyone is hesitant their first time doing anything dance-wise. And like you said, you get through the warm-up, we start doing some stretches, we do a little exercising, and okay, you feel okay. We always start a practice with doing something that everyone can do.
Yeah.
We always set the playing field. You know what? Everyone can do this, so do it. I don't have to explain it. Everyone knows what a push-up is. Okay, do the push-up.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that. Everyone can do that. We all did one. Okay, great. And then we can move past that and we get into something a little bit weirder. But you already know you got one thing out of the way. One task is done. Okay, that part is completed. And I know every time
little
I come
tiny
back,
wins.
Little tiny wins.
Yeah.
Every time I come back, that part will be better. And then we work through the other tasks. And like you said, getting people moving. Dancers think too, honestly. And
course,
in the sense that a lot of us can be up here.
Yeah, totally.
And it's very difficult sometimes because we're always like, it has to be perfect.
Yep.
I have this vision in my head, and then the leg goes above her head, and then we get so caught up in the vision, and the leg does not get as high as we want it to in practice, but the goal is to keep pushing through it, like you said. Keep the ball moving.
Yeah.
Okay, that didn't go, but there are 8 other steps you can work on now, so please.
Yeah.
So it's just building that like the work ethic in terms of getting things moving, being invested, and just doing and letting us fix later sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
So,
I love it. I learned a lot. I love sort of like having this conversation across business and art.
Yeah,
And sort of
super
like the blending
interesting.
of the two.
Yeah.
Really interesting. You guys couldn't have been more perfect guests for this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank you.
it. Thank you.